Dragon Warrior, collectively as a series, are the last NES games I have to play before I can truly say I am done with the console. I regrettably beat all the Final Fantasy games in their original incarnations. The Marios, the Zeldas, the Castlevanias, the Star Tropics, I'm done. But Dragon Warrior as a series has escaped me. I have beaten the original game over and over and love it to death, but Dragon Warrior 2 was always super hard for me to get into. But at the time I'm writing the script, I am 2/3 of the way through Dragon Warrior 2, and though I understand the last third is gonna be hell, I'm happy to grind through. This is my retrospective of the Dragon Warrior series. Am I going to go through the whole series week by week? No, I don't think I could. I would need a break from RPGs. But for January, we're going to be going through Dragon Warrior on the 1st, Dragon Warrior 2 on the 7th, Dragon Warrior 3 on the 14th, and finally Dragon Warrior 4 on the 21st. I will be discussing the original NES games. I have not played the remakes, and I'm generally not the type of person that plays remakes. I mostly just play the original versions of games. This is a retrospective of the original Dragon Warrior. Can we talk about RPGs on the NES before Dragon Quest? There weren't any, or at least there wasn't anything that resembled RPGs in the way we know today. This means Dragon Quest had a whole bunch of stuff to innovate on and simply create. RPGs existed before Dragon Quest, but they were so far removed from accessibility that without Dragon Quest's creators stepping in and streamlining the whole process, I don't think we would be obsessing over these adventures in the same way we do now. Dragon Quest was the game changer, and although Final Fantasy may have had a bigger reception in the West, Final Fantasy wouldn't exist without Dragon Quest. Phantasy Star wouldn't exist without Dragon Quest. Hell, I'd even wager that Simon's Quest and Zelda 2 wouldn't be what they were without Dragon Quest. These collective games from this early RPG series have a much bigger impact than most of the West is aware of. So with all this being said, let's deep dive into Dragon Quest. Considering the year, Yuji Horii was obviously introduced to RPGs early on in the genre's life. A big fan of the Apple PC RPG games, Horii was on the front end of knowledge when it came to a Japanese person's understanding of the genre, especially because before Dragon Quest and early innovators in the Japanese scene, the RPG genre's stronghold was in the Western world. Typically the United States and the United Kingdom. Horii didn't want to make a US RPG, however. Horii had the streamlining of the whole process in mind. Winning a trip to Applefest in the States definitely would have given Horii an introduction to games such as Ultima and Wizardry, and Horii, instead of bringing the complicated RPG procedure to consoles, decided to take elements of these games and cut a tremendous amount of fat from the body of the genre. While we will see how this worked out later, it's very important to know that Dragon Quest, with a half hour of introduction, could be played by anyone. Ultima and Wizardry couldn't be played by a good portion of people who owned the computers they ran on. After famous composer and all-around historical nutcase Sugiyama reached out to Enix to share his praise for previous software they had made, they asked him to do the soundtrack. Toriyama designed the art for the game, and Dragon Quest was on its way. Dragon Quest would release for the Famicom on May the 27th, 1986. The first impression you may get from Dragon Quest could be innovative, could be vintage, could be aged just terribly, but I guess it does depend on how you look at games and whether you find historicity interesting. 1986 was a long time ago, but 1986 was the year this released, and there was simply no better of an RPG for a video game console. Dragon Quest's simple story introduction is no better than any of the multiple platformers of the day trying to ride the Mario train, but the journey you experienced was something different, something more profound. I guess this would just become what the RPG is to fans today, something that was bigger than a level-by-level game, something that felt deeper, a true connection to the world and everything and everyone in it. The original Dragon Quest even manages to separate itself from the RPGs that came after it. Being so stripped down, you are one person, a lone soul wandering the world map. The song playing over you is pretty mysterious, yet adventurous. Dragon Quest has a great sense of immersion. You feel truly like a lone character, someone who is really by themselves this time. With no teammates, it is up to you to save the world. I am gay and have never been My girlfriend wrote this on the script in the Google Docs when I wasn't looking. She's not wrong, but it stings pretty bad. Gameplay-wise, Dragon Quest is an extremely stripped-down game, both in terms of instructions and mechanics. Games that came after would continue to streamline the menu screens, with the original Dragon Quest insisting you go to the menu and choose the stairs command to walk up and down them. Obviously something that wouldn't fly now, but before Dragon Quest, things were even more complicated. Computer RPGs were a different beast altogether, and that's why, sure, looking at Dragon Quest in comparison to even RPGs 20 years ago, it may seem more complicated than it's worth, but Dragon Quest was the start of these mechanics not being a slow, complicated slog. Simplicity is a word that understandably and annoyingly cannot be emphasized enough with this game. It's annoying because you can't get away from talking about it. Attack is attack, limited amount of weapons, you can only equip one, shields and defense clothing is much the same, and magic is insanely limited, with few spells being learnt throughout the adventure. Not to say anything about the fact that it's you alone, no magic user, no wizard, no nothing. You are alone to heal yourself, to attack, to wait, to attack, to wait, to attack, to wait. The encounter rate is high. Sometimes it feels as high as its sequel, though I'm not sure about that. Exploring the world map is quite easily the most interesting part about the game. The small problem is that exploring it means more encounters, which means I'm stopped point blank by monsters when all I want to do is explore a new town or dungeon. However, this is something that would get better as the years went by, and even with the rough grinding and surprise attacks, I love being in the strange world with dungeons and secrets to explore and find. So does it sound just slightly negative right now? All I've been talking about is the game's issues that later games would rectify. But that's not the message I want to convey, because this is one of my favorite games for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Dragon Quest may be old, but for every negative I can give a positive. The encounter rate is high and the mechanics are simplistic, but it's easy to keep track of how much health I have and what I want to do to a specific enemy. Plus the fights are incredibly fast, which is amazing compared to, say, the original Final Fantasy, which was slow as fuck. The fact that you are alone gives a sense of isolation, and once again, it's easy to keep track of two things that, in my opinion, can be huge pluses, or at least is so different from how RPGs would be even a year down the line, that I can appreciate its originality. The fact that I'm exploring this world, finding clues for myself, and talking to all the people is so much more interesting and freeing than being railroaded into the next town and issue. It's an amazing sense of non-linearity that I'm surprised they could even manage this early on. The fact that when I die, I lose half of my gold is a great incentive to play it safe and make sure I don't lose all of my money. Backtracking to the king to save my game gives me a good reason to look in different places of the world as I'm coming back each time. The freedom to go wherever I want means that I can either play it safe and beat on slimes, or get brave and see what I can find and whether I can fight it. Dragon Quest is an incredible game, and one that is so different than how console RPGs would be in 87 and 88. I find it so original not because of what it invented, but what games after invented and stuck with. Dragon Quest is purposefully and accidentally incredibly original. The soundtrack for Dragon Quest, not mind-blowingly inventive. It isn't an incredible use of the sound chip. Then again, how many people had a grasp on the sound chip in 86? Dragon Quest has an amazing introduction. And an acceptable to downright frustrating soundtrack afterward. You definitely feel Sugiyama's relationship to classical music through his compositions, and Sugiyama is on record saying that he found it hard to get what he wanted out of the sound chip. I think people may overestimate just how great the original Dragon Quest's sound chip or soundtrack is, most likely because of how great successors would be in terms of their soundtracks. Most of it is very short compositions. You can tell by how many times the same songs have been looped in this video, with very few techniques used to make the sound chip sound more appealing. What you get by programming the sound chip with few tricks is what you get here. However, though, Dragon Quest's original adventure may not have the most epic of compositions, it definitely fits the game well, and when it needs to feel foreboding, it does. When it needs to feel epic, it does. Sugiyama did a great job with the soundtrack, despite later games perfecting the feeling of Dragon Quest. Even at this point, they were working with withered technology. Graphics are an odd one because the West didn't have the same graphics as Japan. We had an updated version, which by the time Dragon Quest came out here, looked outdated. But given how big the world is, how many different sprites there are, and the fact that this was developed in 1986, it is a pretty impressive feat. I don't think the graphics in Dragon Quest are blowing anyone away, and if anything, Toriyama's drawings and sketches for the original are definitely going to impress you more, but it gets the job done. I left graphics and sound near the end of this because honestly, they are the weakest parts of the original game, but not entirely through neglect. The system was still young and they were trying to understand it as best they could. The original Nintendo was not an advanced system even upon release, so even now, even at this point, they were working with withered technology. conclude, Dragon Quest is more than just history. Sure, going down the chain is going to bring you to Dragon Quest. RPGs would almost all derive from this game, and it should be respected for that, but Dragon Quest should be respected for more than just legacy. It is a game all its own, with simplicity and length being its biggest strengths. However, for some, also its biggest weakness. Dragon Quest is and was a pure Japanese dream, with the top creative minds of its time coming together to make something truly special. While the West wouldn't come to appreciate Dragon Quest in the same way until, like, never, Dragon Quest became the Mario of RPGs there, the Final Fantasy of RPGs to Japan. Dragon Quest was, at the time of release, a perfect game, and it still stands as one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I hope to see you all back here on the 7th when we adventure through Dragon Quest II, released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987.